This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Oh, if you can all mute. There, I think that's better. Okay. So, welcome to the next session. So, this is usually the one that I only teach. So, we talk about how to have successful move-ins in long-term care, and I broke it up into three different ways. So, that people are usually coming into our communities either short stay, rehab through like Medicare or some other insurance, somebody that's permanently moving in through long-term care, and then also touch base a little bit on if somebody is moving in with the payer source of Medicaid. I want to go through this presentation without the thought of COVID, and then once it's finished, we'll talk a little bit about what is occurring now and the things to be mindful of. So, all right, so the first thing is when we think about somebody that's going to move into our campus, coming out of the hospital, they're going to do some short stay rehab. Now, the majority of the people that come to us are usually utilizing Medicare benefits, but more and more now we're seeing a lot of people with, whether it be like Aetna or United Health, community care, other insurance providers. So be really mindful of who those are coming in. Like we do not have a contract with community care, but if somebody already lives on our campus and has community care, then we can serve them. So know if you have agreements with those types of insurance companies, you certainly wouldn't want to bring somebody in that you wouldn't be able to seek reimbursement for. So to start those connections, you want to have some type of relationship with the hospital discharge or the caseworkers at your local hospitals. Here in Tulsa, there's the large health systems that we work with. If you're in more of a rural area, you might only have kind of one referral source or, one local hospital, which makes it a little bit easier to make that connection. But customer service really does go a long way. Having the ability to call up that case manager. They know who you are. You can talk to them about the individual. They also are, they look for good referral places. They want people to have a good experience when they go get rehab and things. So when they're talking to families and things, I mean, families are always going to ask them, well, where should we go? Who should we be looking at? And it's going to be that discharge planner, that caseworker that provides them that short list of their recommendations. So the more that you can create that connection with them, the better. Try to be really attentive to them. Following up with their phone calls, you're going to get a lot of them because they have a lot of discharges. And I mean, sometimes you're full or you're unable to take that individual. Still, just follow up with that case manager so that they know. Sometimes that creates a lot of anxiety for them when they've got all these phone calls out. They're trying to find somebody, place them, and nobody's giving them a call back. And even just a call saying, "Hey, we're unable to do that," that at least marks it off one person on their list. So obviously, right now we can't do a lot of visits, but we have a healthcare liaison staff member. So we actually have an RN that her only position, her only responsibility is helping people transition from the hospitals to our campus. So she spends a lot of time traveling to the hospitals, meeting with the discharge planners, meeting with the family and the resident. And not everybody has the opportunity to have that position. So if you don't, maybe your admission nurse, or if you've got kind of like a move-in coordinator or marketer, if they're able to once in a while at least just make a in-person visit, kind of put a name to the face and things, that helps create that connection as well. So when you're bringing somebody in, make sure that you really understand what is involved in their care. That's another reason why we created that healthcare liaison position. So now they're going to the hospital, finding out exactly what they are going to need. Is there any special equipment, such as like even just IV equipment. Do you have the IV poles and things set up before they get there in the pumps? We know that like wound vac, like the reimbursement rate is great on that. Well, we don't have nurses that are trained for it or that feel comfortable managing that, so we can't take that individual that has those things. Or if we've got an individual that needs bariatric care, do you have the wheelchair, the bed and things to be able to do that? So make sure that if there is any kind of odds and ends special equipment, that you know that before that individual's hitting the door, so that you're not, that nurse on the floor isn't trying to scrounge up equipment and call around to DMEs, because we know that discharges typically happen later in the day, and you don't want somebody showing up at 5 and you don't have what they need to get through the evening. Is the individual a fall risk or anything? Every elder that goes into the hospital, they put that yellow band on their wrist that says fall risk. It just is going to happen. But are they working with therapy? Have they been able to get up or anything? Do they have, what's their cognition like? Be able to know that, in our short stay rehab, it's not always the best fit for individuals that have severe dementia. They're not a locked area or anything like that. So just know what's that individual going to be like. I mean, you want that snapshot of what you're going to be providing care. So, and if there is any specific questions or things that you don't know, I mean, make sure that it's not one person that's making that decision. That you're following up with the MDS coordinator, your therapy director, maybe. The director of nursing certainly needs to be kind of maybe that last stop if there's any conflict or anything. Myself as the administrator, hardly ever get pulled into it. Just today, I got a text from our healthcare liaison that we've got somebody in the hospital. They've got Medicare benefits, but they don't have a supplementary insurance. So how do we feel about that? And basically, my answer was, as long as that individual, that family knows that they are responsible for that copayment after those first 20 days, that, I mean, we will provide care to them. We just want them to know what they are looking at financially. And that would be anywhere they go, they're going to be doing that. So very seldom do I get pulled in, even though it was today that I got a call. So, and then you want to make sure if somebody's utilizing Medicare benefits, have they utilized anything already? And so you need their common working file. Your billing in individuals are going to be able to do that. We've got our social worker can double check that. Our moving coordinator, like we've trained some different people to make sure that they know how to go in there and see, have they already been somewhere that they've been using up their days? Do they only have a few of them left? And if somebody's been using days, you need to be aware that that common working file is sometimes lagging. So let's say somebody's used 60 days somewhere and they're back in the hospital and now they're going to be coming to you. They may have used more than 60 days because some of it just hasn't been billed out yet. So anytime you see somebody that has a large amount of days used up, because there's a total of 100 days available if somebody were to. So once you get over 50 or anything, make sure you really double check. That's also why we've got a pretty good working relationship with our billers, to where, I mean, we can call and ask them, really specific questions, and they can try to hunt down answers on any individual. Again, I already said, if it's not Medicare, you've got these other insurances. Just be really aware of that. Something that I'm becoming more and more aware of is when you have some of those other insurances, United Healthcare specifically for us, or Aetna, we are finding ourselves continually getting audited for people who have been here a year or two in the past. And so if you've got two people at the hospital, one's got Medicare, one's got this other type of insurance, and you've only got one space, I can tell you right now, the Medicare individual is always the one that we're going to pick. Aetna is another one that you have to send in documentation every 3 days while somebody is here on a skilled stay, to keep getting authorizations, and it just adds a lot of work to our team. That if we can avoid it by choosing somebody else, we will. But you don't always get that option. We also have to serve the individuals that live in our residential living campus. So, whatever insurance they have, we're going to work with them. So it's kind of a headache. Medicare is certainly our preferred, but there's a lot of other ones out there. When you're looking at somebody that's moving in permanently, so they're going to be moving into long-term care. Maybe they're coming from another community, maybe they're coming from home. We always do have them fill out an application, looking at financials. Our average length of stay is around a year, give or take a little bit. And that doesn't move too much. Over the 10 years I've been here, it's fairly stable on that. But you do, like our CFO is the one that approves every application that goes through, and he's just looking to see, okay, do people have enough finances to at least pay for a little while? Because again, if we had all Medicaid as our payer source, our budget would look a little wonky. We probably wouldn't be able to meet some of those needs. So, and I'll talk about that in a second. But so we look at their application. You want to make sure that wherever they're going, the open room that you have, is that right for that individual? Are they looking for, private, semi-private, things of that nature? When they are semi-private, what does that roommate situation look like? Are those two going to get along very well? We try our best to notify, the individual already in there, hey, somebody's going to be moving in on this date and things. You try to give them a little bit of heads up. We also try to introduce them as soon as we can as well, because roommates share a lot of different things as far as their entryway, their bathroom, and they're going to get to know each other pretty intimately. From the previous presentation I did, that we have different households. There's a first floor and a second floor. Each one of those households kind of have their own characteristics, their own personalities. And so when somebody is wanting to move in here permanently, we kind of look to where would they fit? Who are they going to maybe become friends with, and it would benefit them to live in this certain area and things. It's happened in the past where, a lot of our men have kind of gravitated into one house. So if we've got another man wanting to move in, we would really like him to be in that household where there's a majority of other men. Just kind of helps build those relationships and things. And while we start charging or billing that individual on the day that they move in, and again, COVID's in the way right now, but if there's a way for family to move furniture, to have things set up before they actually get here, man, that makes a big difference. Because already move day is hectic, it's stressful, and the more that you can do to reduce that, or that when that individual comes in, oh man, my pictures are on the wall, my bedspread's already on my bed, there's my my nightstand from home, that really adds a piece of them really starting to feel welcome and to start to adapt into that space. We provide, bed, nightstand, and a chair for everybody, but we tell people you can remove any and all of that. We really encourage they use our bed, but for most people, they pull out that chair and that nightstand. They bring their own things. They've got their recliner, their little bedside table, and maybe like a chest of drawers that their TV sits on. Any way to personalize that space, we want them to be able to do that. And so I certainly encourage everybody else to do that too. Finally, when you're looking at somebody moving in on Medicaid, there really should be no difference in how you treat that individual from somebody moving in permanently, private pay, and somebody moving Medicaid. But the things to be aware of is you want to really double check their application status, make sure that they are already accepted on Medicaid. Our finance people here, they've kind of built, again, that relationship with a caseworker at OKDHS to where they can call, not only just check the status, but if there's something kind of wonky or like a red flag, again, if you've got a relationship with that caseworker, they can tell you a little bit more rather than just the flat out status of it. Things that we have ran into in the past is maybe somebody that they're like, oh yeah, we've put in the application, we're just waiting for it to be approved, and Medicaid does backdate, so once it's approved, it will pay back. And so somebody saying, yeah, once we move in, obviously it's going to be approved, and you guys will be paid, from the date that we moved in. Well, we checked their application status, and yes, it's pending, but before they had repeated rejections. Well, that's a pretty big red flag because obviously there's something in there financially that the family or the individual was doing that's not allowing them to go on to Medicaid. So, what the reasons we have seen is that, there's just straight out, the family was maybe taking money, or, there's something in there to where they tried to spend down really quickly and they didn't spend down correctly. And so if you can do it, you only want to accept people that have the acceptance through OKDHS. So, and then just be mindful of how many individuals you have living in your community already on Medicaid. Again, some communities are almost straight Medicaid, and they run off that. Their system and their models are built for that. Us here, we're not. We have to have a number of individuals on private pay to be able to afford some of the things that we do. So we have 82 rooms available in our health center. 20 of those are pretty much geared straight at skilled short stay. So out of the rest of them, we've always came with a number of like 12 or less helps us. We've been at 14 in the past. And again, it doesn't create a big strain, but it's just something to be mindful. When we get up to, we've got a dozen people living on Medicaid, our move-in coordinator needs to be mindful of that. And when we get those applications, we have to tell people, no, on the forefront, just because we don't want to get ourselves in too much of a pickle. So, if you work at a larger community, so a life plan community that's got residential living and assisted living and things, when those people are moving into assisted living and a residential living, they have to do the financials just like anybody else. And so when people are moving in, like us, we try to think about that. We look at their actuary tables. And so we don't want somebody to move into assisted living or into independent living, and after a year or two, they've have already spent through all their wealth. That's not very good planning for them. And then now we're looking at, okay, we can help you get on Medicaid, but you really don't fit in long-term care. You're so, much more independent, and, your peers aren't exactly the same as maybe they are. So just be mindful of that. And I think most finance departments are very aware of that. But when you do have people that have lived there for a long time, and maybe have kind of outlived some of their financial planning, just be aware of that. We have actually made adjustments to our monthly payments, what we bill individuals in residential living and assisted living, to accommodate what would essentially be their patient liability under Medicaid. And then they can stay in that apartment or anything, because moving them again to long-term care might not be the best fit for them. That's typically, and I got one other thing. So when somebody is moving in, doesn't matter what area of the campus, but specifically in long-term care, you want to create some kind of checklist, some kind of thing that you can make sure that you uniformly are not only just treating everybody the same, but that you are making sure that you're checking off the things that you need to do, that you're required to do for each individual. So before they move in, you need to have a nurse kind of go through this checklist. I used to hand out one that I had created back in the day. And now our healthcare liaison continues to kind of play with hers, but it's got some of those things on it of like who's their insurance and their payer, what kind of special equipment might they need, a little bit of their social history, what led them maybe into the hospital or into long-term care, things of that nature. Um, just so you can get again a little bit better of a snapshot. You want to be able to collect everything that you can about that person and send that to the caregivers that are going to be working with that individual. Get it to that intake nurse or your admission coordinator, because if I'm working as a charge nurse and I've got somebody moving in today, if I don't know anything about them except for their clinicals that shows up on my desk an hour before they get here, it's hard to really get an idea of that person. And now they're going to live here permanently. But if I can get even just a basic information about them a day ahead of time or something like that, just to be able to share with other individuals. And then when they show up, I know their name, a little bit about them, and when I'm welcoming them, it feels more personal. That makes a big difference. Again, we go back to that world maker. They're coming into this world now. It's completely new to them. And how are you going to interact with them? How are you going to make their day better than it would have been? We do try to kind of simplify it. We don't want my gosh, when you get the clinicals from a hospital, they can be, pages and pages and pages. And if you're not a nurse, if you're not super clinical and used to looking at those things, I look at them and my eyes gloss over. There's certain things that I know to look for, but there's a lot of it that doesn't help me. But if you had this same sheet, it doesn't matter what hospital you're coming from, or where that's a uniform thing that always looks the same for everybody that's moving in. That helps the staff be able to understand them and be able to read that. So that's what you try to do prior to them moving in. Then when they actually move in, the day that they move in, somebody needs to be there to welcome them. So whether it's somebody in social services, or if you've got a move-in coordinator, somebody that actually takes them from the door to the room that they're going to be in. We try to give them a little welcome packet that just gives them information about the campus, our history, how to get a hold of certain people, phone numbers, things of that nature. It not only is a packet for the individual that's living there, but then there's some sheets for the family to take with them. Because again, contact numbers, contact names, that's so important when you are moving somebody in. They're giving all their trust in us, and we want them to feel really comfortable that their family member, their loved one, is going to be safe, is going to be taken care of. And right off the bat, we try to put names to faces, because we don't want them to just think, oh, it's staff or nurse or aide. We want them to say, oh, it's Julie, it's Jacob, it's Thomas. We want them to make those connections. Again, sometimes that that social service, that moving coordinator, has to do some paperwork with them and stuff like that. So when you're doing that move-in, when you meet them at the door, I don't like people to be like, oh, come on in, we'll get your paperwork done, get that out of the way, because it almost feels like it's a task that I got to do, which it is. But why don't you take them in and be like, I do have a little bit of paperwork to do with you today. So whenever you're free or you got a moment, let me know. And so that's traditionally how, I was our administrator of our assisted living before this, and I did all that moving stuff. And so that's what I did. I met him at the door. I took him up there, said that exact thing. Whenever you got time, and some people were like, "Oh, yeah, let's knock it out, get it out of the way," and perfect, we can do that. Otherwise, some people were like, "Yeah, let's, we need to catch our breath, put some things away." I'll be like, perfect. Yeah, you find me when you need to. If it's getting a little bit later in the day, I'll check back with you. And so we go on, about our day, and I can check back with them. But I don't want them to ever feel like, hey, get your stuff done. Come on. Because move day is a big day for them. And we want them to feel as comfortable as possible, because it's not just me that needs to do paperwork. A nurse is probably going to be having to come in and do a head to toe assessment and stuff. So they're already going to have a bunch of people coming in and telling them that they need the things to do. So as comfortable as I can make them, I'm going to. And then make sure that you've got advanced directives on file. If they have them, do they understand what a DNR is, the difference between a DNR, a living will, a durable power of attorney? I've met a lot of people that when I ask them if they have a DNR or if it's up to date, and they're like, oh yeah, we have something like that. And then they give me a living will, and I'm like, well, I want you to understand that that's not what you said. Like a DNR is totally different, and making sure that you educate people on that. If they want those things, they can put them in place. And so I have found a lot of people that thought that they understood advanced directives, but then once they were explained to them, they kind of opened their eyes a little bit more and things. So I've also once in a great while find an advanced directive or like a durable power of attorney that most people at that stage have maybe went to an attorney and actually had the paperwork like drawn up and stuff. But I mean, others have printed off forms online or did them kind of rushed or anything. And you want to make sure those witnesses that signed like a DPOA or anything like that are not the relatives that are also listed on there. So I have found that a couple times, and I let people know like, hey, I just want you to be aware that this isn't that it's not a binding one. If you want to do this again, we've got staff here that can sign that as witnesses or anything, but you can't have your sister signing as a witness because she's related to your mom, things of that nature. So, and then once that that person's moved in, don't forget about them. Don't think that okay, that staff in that household, they've got it. Check back in, follow up, see if there's anything else that you missed. Again, it's that customer service from beginning to end. And I try to not only check back in with that individual, see how they're doing, how what do you think about the place, what input do you have for us, but then make sure you follow up with that family and say, how are you guys doing? Have you been able to reach or have you been able to visit your loved one? Do you need any other phone numbers? Is there anything that you haven't brought in yet? You need help? I mean, you'd be amazed at how many times people move in and then us on the administration side, the marketing side, we're done with that and we move on to the next person. That when we start those connections, when we make that effort to reach back out to people, it makes a really big difference. And you need to know as an administrator, you will be working with families a lot, that whenever something arises where there's a conflict or a concern or anything like that, they're going to be coming to you. And if you have that relationship with them, if it's not, oh yeah, I remember when you moved in and now it's, a year later and you've got an issue and now I need to solve that. Well, I have to build that relationship back in there before I can help really resolve any conflict. So more you can do on the front end, the better it is going to be for yourself. And again, I mean, it might not always be you. Maybe there's your social worker, or like we have household managers in each house. I really encourage them to really be involved as well. So I moved through some of that. Yep, there again, my same contact information. So I moved through that fairly quickly. And again, a lot of that had to do with non-COVID related. So let's spend a little bit of time on what is different now versus what was occurring last year. With COVID, families aren't able to come in and visit. You're not able to usually get into the hospitals to see those individuals to get some of that criteria that you wanted. Because of some of the inroads that we had already made with case managers and discharge planners, we are able to get a lot of that from them. Whereas if we were to go in and actually meet with the family and things of that nature, again, it's because we built a relationship with those individuals that maybe they'll take it on themselves to gain some of that information from the individual when they don't have to. They could just be like, look, I've sent the clinicals over to you. I need a yes or no kind of thing. But if we are like, hey, can you get a little bit more information from them? Send them our form and say, as much as you can, fill this out. That will really help us. When you've built that relationship, they're more likely to say yes rather than just like, we don't know you, Adam to Eve. We're gonna, move on to somebody else. As far as COVID tests and things, it's all on the individual's policies on what they're wanting to do. For a while, we were stating that we wanted to have a negative test before they can move in, and a lot of times they're doing that automatically from the hospital side. But once you've had a negative test, I mean, you still have so many contacts in between that test was taken and then when you move in. So that doesn't void you from having to do a 14-day quarantine. So you're still going to have somebody move in and do a quarantine. We have set it up to where one of our households is a quarantine house. So no matter where you're coming from, whether it's your home or another facility or the hospital, when somebody comes to our campus, they must go to that household and complete their quarantine time period before they move to wherever that permanent room is that they're going to be going to. What we've seen is that has created a pretty good bottleneck for us, that we've got individuals that live in long-term care that go to the hospital and would traditionally return back to their room. Well, now they have to go into that quarantine room. And so now they're taking up 2 spaces in our health center. So our census has dropped. I mean, we've had to kind of play with some of those things, but there's a lot of regulation out there, and the more careful you can be, the better off you are. But again, just treat everybody the same as that. All right, we've got to go through this quarantine process. Depending on where you are in the state, you've got different levels of what our phased reopening was with like the green, yellow, orange. Pretty much everybody in the state is orange right now based on the OSDH map, but then there's also the CMS positivity rates. There's so much that you have to keep up with. And your move-in coordinator, your healthcare liaison, I think they have a lot of pressure on them to keep getting people to move in here, to reassure families that when they come in here, we're going to keep them safe. We have had positive cases here at our community. I think most people have had, a number of them. And I can tell you, when we had positive cases, the first time we had a positive case, we just stopped all admissions. We just said, we don't want to move anybody in. We're not sure how this will be handled, if it will spread or anything like that. Now, it never created an outbreak or anything, but we also really suffered on our census because we went 2 weeks without moving anybody else in. And for a community of 82, rooms, our census rolls over a lot. We have move-ins and move-outs almost every day. So you can imagine if you continue to have move-outs but no move-ins, your bottom line is going to start hurting a little bit. The second time we had cases, we really worked to put in our isolation protocols and things, and we held off for just a few days and then we opened it back up. But we found that those conversations with the individuals and the family members were really key to letting them know that you're going to be moving in here. We do have positive cases. They're not going to be in the same area where your family member or loved one is going to be moving to, and we're putting every precaution in place to make sure that it doesn't spread. And we certainly had people that decided not to move to us or not to come to us for therapy during that time period. But we also felt like the more transparent we could be, the better it was, because surprising somebody with anything else could have a really negative impact on their stay and on the relationship that we have with them, and just word of mouth and things. So in this time period, that's probably the biggest thing is transparency and making sure that you're very aware of the individual that's coming in and what they need. Um, so I'm curious what questions you guys have, both on just traditionally when somebody's moving in, the steps that you need to take, the things that we put in place, but also just in this new environment of everything that's going on. Are there questions or concerns that you might have about people moving into your campuses related to COVID? Nothing out there, huh? Sometimes people are in. Oh, go ahead.
It was an accident, sorry.
Okay. Sometimes people are curious. The community that I work at is a good sized community, and sometimes these more rural areas where you've got kind of a smaller site and um, one individual wears multiple hats, to where you're doing the move in and the marketing and the admission, all that kind of stuff. Um, it's hard maybe to accomplish all of those tasks. So just think about what's gonna help create those relationships more than the others. And just like we talked about with culture change, you can't just change everything all at one time. So make steps. Think about if I create a checklist, at least that helps me to understand what I need to get and completed and on a time frame. And then maybe I can start reaching out to discharge planners to start building those relationships. And I mean, honestly, those things not only help the individual doing the move in, but it really helps the entire team. And so you're trying to do a kind of a start from finish, streamline this move in process. The more uniform you can make them, the better they are. We also try to make sure that any move in that comes is getting here before 3 o'clock that day, so that if there's any discrepancies in orders, we can get that to the pharmacies before they're closing. We can follow up with physicians' offices before they are closing for the day. They need any equipment that we somehow missed and things. So when you've got admissions coming in the evening, it's really difficult to make that a successful move in for that individual and for that team. So we also have found that working with like a third party transportation vendor has really helped us. I mean, it's an extra cost, but when somebody is transferring from the hospital to us through like EMSA, now obviously they might have to use EMSA and we're kind of on their timeline. But if they don't have to use that, they just need like a wheelchair van or something of that nature. Well, if we can use a transportation company that costs us maybe $60 for that ride over, but it means that that individual doesn't have to wait in the hospital all afternoon into the evening, just waiting and waiting. And we get them here at an earlier time so that sun's still up and we get to do our assessments and double check everything. I mean, that $60 is kind of well worth it in our mind. So we have found that utilizing that, we started that a few years ago, and that's made a really big difference. Because we don't allow our transportation here on campus to go pick somebody up from the hospital, because usually you're kind of wanting somebody with some healthcare experience, and our drivers don't have any of that. We don't want to put them in a situation where somebody's got a health crisis all of a sudden in the car and they're not sure what to do. So any final questions that you guys have about anything that we discussed today? I feel like things kind of move a little bit more quickly when I don't actually get to see you guys and try to interact a little bit more. So, well, I really appreciate it, Z. I think you can probably stop the recording piece of it. I'm curious where you guys are in your journey through the AU. How much longer do you have?